All right, y'all ready? All right, let's go ahead and get this started. Welcome back, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, and we're about to launch our next panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Jana is going to moderate this panel today. It'll last an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm sure we'll have opportunity for some questions toward the end. I'll remind you that the Whova app has some functionalities that you might want to explore, including I noticed a growing list of some excellent photographs. So if you've got some great pictures related to marine energy that you want to post on there, I'm sure we'd all love to see them. So with that, I will hand it off to Jana. Thank you so much, and I'll let you take it from here.
Terrific. Well, at this prompt start at the top of the hour, I want to welcome everyone. I join you from a little bit further south, from the ancestral territory of the Wiyot people in Northern California. I want to thank Pacific Ocean Energy Trust, with the best acronym around, POET, for convening this important conference. As we all investigate the potentials of offshore wind and other forms of clean and renewable energy, we're here to examine closely how we improve equity, diversity, and inclusion, sometimes referred to as EDI or DEI in the energy sector, and in the marine sector in specific, through channels such as how do we make clean energy more accessible? How do we organize capacity building for a more diverse and more representative energy sector? And what are the contextual supports we need in areas such as STEM and STEAM education, evaluation support so we can prove our progress, and other ways in which we should think about this new, emerging, and sometimes difficult area of thought and study. So in this learning today, we have an expert panel. We have Adrienne Rackley, an economist with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. We have Arielle Cardinal, the water power program integrator with the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we have Shannon Souza, the policy director for Pacific Ocean Energy Trust. In a minute, I'll turn to each panelist, starting with Adrienne, to give presentation and a more full introduction of their roles and responsibilities. We'll hear from each of our three panelists and then have a discussion at the end. So please, in the meantime, put your questions, comments in the chat box, and then that will be there for us when we hit that discussion portion of this session. Before that, though, I'll say a few words from my chair as moderator. As many of you, I'm here in three capacities, which is how we go through life. Sustainability and Government Affairs Director for a Native American tribal government, the Blue Lake Rancheria. I'm co-chair of the Department of Energy's National Working Group on Energy and Infrastructure and Development on Tribal Lands. And there are many EDI case studies from tribal lands that we can talk about later. And I'm the launch lead of a new initiative called the Redwood Region Climate and Community Resilience Hub, or CORE Hub, which among other bold goals is directly investing in equity, diversity, and inclusion, both in participation and outcomes related to offshore wind and overall climate resilience. One of the CORE Hub's key operational strategies is that wherever we talk about increasing EDI, through deeper community engagement, more knowledgeable decision-making, that we need to fund it with real money that funds time and capacity building. So I have a small story before we turn to the presenters. You may have heard of Grid Alternatives. They're a nonprofit focused on bringing clean solar energy storage and electrified transportation to low-income and marginalized communities. They have a grassroots bottom-up approach to support people in exploring solar-based careers. Grid created a program as an example for Native American tribal nations, and many tribes have participated in their work. The Blue Lake Rancheria partnered with the Department of Energy through their Solar Energy Technologies Office and Grid to fund paid training programs, particularly for EDI outcomes in Native American communities. And there's two stories I want to relate. One is a Native American woman who had identified her dream job as a planner in her community, but did not have the resume to make herself competitive. She went through this solar energy training, accessible to her because it was paid, and obtained the hands-on experience, rounded out her resume, and landed the role. Another young tribal member was underemployed in the gig economy. Then COVID-19 hit, which reduced his hours further. He signed up for this paid training and landed a job with a solar installer company, and used his first paycheck to buy his first set of hand tools. These are real stories where equity, diversity, and inclusion programs and policies are resulting in real careers for real people. And the key is that we are paying people to reorganize and go for careers in these areas that they may not think of right off the top of their head. Because application of equity, diversity, inclusion principles within technical sectors is relatively new, it's rapidly emerging, and it's difficult. And as we increase participation, we can expect continual rethinking and adaptive change from how initial policies and programs were designed, to continually measure the outcomes and expand the conversation about who is not part of the conversation and why, and removing the why. And then we look at the numbers, rigorous evaluation. How do we prove up these EDI metrics, and what are they? So we're making progress. Programs at the DOE, such as the U.S. Clean Energy Education and Empowerment Initiative, or C3E, which is easier to remember, has a goal of advancing women's leadership in clean energy. There are STEM mentoring cafes aimed at inspiring historically underrepresented and underserved populations to consider STEM careers. At the same time, 2 million women have dropped out of the workforce since COVID-19 hit 18 months ago, and the numbers are grim on whether or not they will re-engage. So with all of that said, let's turn to our experts for their thinking. Adrienne Rackley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jana. Those are powerful stories. Thank you for sharing those. So I am going to set up my screen here to present. And I'm sharing today a program that Pacific Northwest National Laboratory is beginning its energy storage for social equity.
And Adrienne, we can hear you just fine, so.
Great, thank you.
No worries on that score.
Okay, are you able to see my slides?
We are.
Okay, so again, my name is Adrienne Rackley. I'm an energy economist and policy scientist for Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And I'll be sharing this new program, Energy Storage for Social Equity, that PNNL is launching. So first, I want to acknowledge our sponsor and our partners. So our technical assistance program is supported by the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Electricity Energy Storage Program. Pacific Northwest National Laboratory leads the technical assistance project phase, including a selection process and an equity and workforce analysis, while Sandia National Laboratories heads the project development and deployment phases, providing engineering support and performance validation. So as I think you all know, there's been a significantly increased focus on equity and justice. The Department of Energy has been under direction by the current administration and has also been investigating of its own accord the connection between energy systems and equity and justice issues. Some of this increased focus has led to Shalonda Baker's appointment. She is in a new position as the Deputy Director for Energy Justice, and also a new Justice 40 initiative, which targets delivering 40% of the overall benefits of climate and clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities. There are also a handful of executive orders that have come out. For example, Executive Order 13985 addresses advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. It defines a list of underserved communities, including Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Native American populations, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, other persons of color, LGBTQ+ communities, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, and people affected by poverty and inequality. So here I want to just pause and acknowledge some of the language that's used in these DOE documents and communications. I know that terms like disadvantaged and marginalized are not always the favored terminology. It can place people kind of in the position of being a victim. And so communities sometimes will prefer terminology such as overburdened and underserved. And I'm going to make an effort to use that terminology, but just want to acknowledge that terms like disadvantaged and marginalized do show up, and they might trigger some people. So the Energy Storage for Social Equity program is offering a technical assistance program. So what is technical assistance? Leaders at DOE Energy Storage Program, PNNL, and Sandia have been thinking about the role of energy storage in advancing energy equity and environmental justice. And we're asking, what is the link between the technology and benefiting communities? The technical assistance piece is tailored directly to the needs of a community and the problems they're facing. And it's meant to go directly to a stakeholder and address the challenge and connect them with a technology solution. Some of the key components of this TA program are easy access and targeted outreach. So we're targeting overburdened and underserved communities, making sure that the accessibility of the application process is not a barrier to participation. And we're targeting that at least 40% of the benefits of this program go to communities that are qualified under the Justice 40 program. There's support for partnerships, and we're framing this around problems that communities are facing. And then we're looking at what solutions we can bring to address those problems. This is in contrast to a lot of technical assistance programs, which bring a technology solution and then look to pair that technology solution with communities that need it. So we're placing the problem that the community is facing first, and then looking for the best technology solution to address that problem. Each technical assistance community receives an equity and workforce analysis. This is intended to show the relationship between energy equity and the energy systems issues they are experiencing, so we can better understand why those connections exist. There's also a direct lead to investment. So there's a connection to a funding opportunity at the end of the technical assistance program, and this program is intending to prepare the community to take in that funding and do the work. Finally, this is a community of communities. It's meant to be a cohort where peer communities can interact and support each other through similar problems. We think there's a lot of value in peer-to-peer sharing and support, and we're connecting them to one another in addition to providing the technical support. So this slide is showing the relationships that we see between energy storage and equity. So this is where we're looking for the need in the community on the right-hand side. Are they facing a high energy burden? Are they facing accessibility issues, environmental impacts, poor air quality, or more frequent natural disasters due to climate change? And we're looking at storage to see how storage might address those problems. This allows the community members to define the biggest problems they're facing and for us to make sure we're offering the best solution, even if that means directing the community to another program when storage isn't a good fit. So one example is, a rural community might come to us or we may reach out to them and say, they might identify a problem that they're facing as unreliable energy or energy that's not affordable. And PNNL can then evaluate whether energy storage might help curb high demand rates and improve access in the rural community. We would assign metrics based on this goal to evaluate energy burden as a percent of income, or potentially the number of households supplied with electricity, as well as inviting the community to define what success looks like for them, and then to incorporate the community's metrics. The objective, we're looking to provide technical assistance to advance energy equity, targeted to disadvantaged communities, identifying energy challenges, and meeting community-defined goals. Our goal is to transition communities from problem to solution identification through technical analysis and partnership development. We're really looking to support overburdened and underserved communities affected by unreliable and expensive energy systems and supplies. The program is designed to offer assessments on feasibility, design, and application to enhance the community benefit outcomes. So our process, PNNL is heading the application and technical assistance, as I mentioned before. The application process to enhance accessibility and lower the barrier to participation, we're offering an optional interest form. So a community can submit a very brief form that says, hey, we are interested in this program. And then a PNNL staff member will reach out to them to offer clarification and guidance and any assistance that that community needs to complete the application. Then there's the secondary application step. It is also designed to be brief, but informative, and really just hit on the high notes that we're looking for in the application. It does not require the community to be, to hire an expert to complete this application. Although I will say PNNL will be there to help if they do need expert guidance. Ultimately, we're looking to select around 10 to 15 communities to participate in the technical assistance program, and the program will vary based on project, but the options might include energy analysis and economic analysis, geospatial analysis, and assistance with applying for grants and funding. I mentioned that all technical assistance is accompanied by an equity and workforce analysis, and the technical assistance is free to selected communities, but it's not accompanied by its own funding source. Sandia is leading the project development and deployment portions. They are providing engineering support for project development and deployment of systems, transitioning an identified solution into system deployment to meet community-defined goals. There will also be demonstration and deployment through Sandia's existing project pipeline and demonstration program. They are targeting selecting up to 6 communities. We are recognizing that the technical assistance piece will take a little bit of time to get communities through to the development and demonstration phase. So this existing project pipeline will have communities ready to go right away. Sandia's project support will vary again based on project, but it might include things like system and equipment sizing, site development, design review, system safety review, installation and commissioning guidance, system performance validation, and potential cost share funding. So our program outcomes, what we are hoping to accomplish through this process, we want to connect disadvantaged communities with energy solutions that support equitable outcomes. We have a direct link to energy storage, but again, if storage is not the best solution, we would look to connect the community with a solution that would be a better fit. We are demonstrating the role of energy storage and energy equity. This is through specific use cases and the equity and workforce assessment. We're developing methods and metrics to analyze the impact of investment on equity. So we're utilizing some metrics that have been previously defined depending on the use case. For example, I mentioned that energy burden could be calculated as a % of household income, but we're also allowing for community and stakeholder participation in defining metrics and defining what success looks like for them. We plan to report on lessons learned and best practices to support future work across DOE. And we are growing and strengthening the DOE project pipeline. So I want to just wrap up by bringing this back to some high-level takeaways and concepts that I think are really foundational and can be applied across programs, not just technical assistance programs, but all programs that are seeking to advance equity and justice. So one of the key pillars is that we're seeking to make this a community-led initiative, and we're centering people in their own stories. So communities are defining the problems they want to address and how success is measured. This challenges us, PNNL, Sandia, and Department of Energy to have the courage and willingness to adapt our program to deliver what is best for the community. We're taking a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down. We're making this accessible and lowering the barriers to entry. So again, the interest form prior to application, if communities want support in completing the application, a PNNL staff member will be there to offer alternative methods to complete the application and form, to provide advice and guidance on completion. And we're considering that, the nature of this program is we're reaching out to communities that may not have reliable energy or reliable internet access. So, can they complete these forms over the phone, or what are some alternatives? We're leveraging community organizations that have relationships and are trusted. This is key to getting the word out in places where language or cultural differences might hinder our team from reaching out directly. And we're seeking to reduce the number of times that communities are asked for the same information. So if we can gather information from other sources before asking the community to respond, that's preferable. So data-driven ethical reporting and accountability. We've identified some metrics and data that are kind of established, and we'll be disaggregating those by demographic and socioeconomic factors. So we don't hide or cover up where certain groups may be experiencing disproportionate impacts or are not being served at the same level as another group. We're also making space for the community to tell their own story from their own perspective. And this is in contrast to, the national laboratories and the Department of Energy kind of coming in and telling the narrative from our perspective. It's really important that the community has space to tell their own story. And finally, learning and growth. So we are looking forward to following through on sharing our program outcomes and what we've learned so that we can offer effective programs in the future and also avoid subjecting participants to those programs or practices that we know are ineffective or even harmful. Just as we are learning from past programs, reviewing past technical assistance programs, successes and failures, so we don't repeat the same mistakes, we expect that DOE and future programs will learn from our experience and learn what has worked and what hasn't. So I'm really passionate about this. We need to be taking action on diversity, equity, and inclusion within our organizations and the people we serve. That includes diverse representation on our project teams, on our committees, and in involving community stakeholders. And that's not just for appearances, but to actually listen and again, to have the courage to change our programs and policies with the feedback we receive. And I think this is foundational to building a clean energy future that is inclusive. So that is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this panel.
Adrienne, we're going to save most of the questions for the end, but we did have one technical request from Cassie, which is, could you please repeat the list of services and support activities that PNNL can provide as assistance? She gives examples of design, review, sizing, cost share, et cetera. And I think you had a slide on that.
Yeah, let's see if I can navigate back here.
And then just so people know while we're waiting, enter your questions, please, in the Q&A portal on Zoom. And we'll be gathering those up and getting to as many as possible at the end of the presentations. But I just wanted to make sure that that we answered this one technical question about the presentation.
So is this the slide you were thinking of maybe? So our technical assistance offerings would include things like an energy analysis, an economic analysis, geospatial, and grant and funding application assistance.
Yeah, I think that's what the question was alluding to. And then we should clarify that these materials, I believe, will be available to attendees after the conference. So the presentations, this material, contact information will be available. Thank you so much, Adrienne. I think this is perfect.
Thank you. And I think Cassie, maybe you mentioned design review. I think that's the Sandia portion with the project development and demonstration. Let me paste that list in the chat. With that might be a good way to deliver that.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. So with another reminder that questions go in Q&A or just type them in anywhere and we'll collate them. I'm going to turn now to Arielle. Arielle Cardinal, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. And just give me a second to get my computer sharing. Are you all seeing the presentation?
We are, thank you.
All right, so hi, yeah, my name is Arielle Cardinal. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and I'm certainly excited to be at OREC again, despite the virtual nature. So my presentation today is going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, otherwise known as DEI, specific to NREL's Water Power, Workforce, and STEM project. I do want to preface this and say that I'm just one of many folks at NREL working on this project, and I'll certainly do my best to summarize the work of others, but I really wanted to acknowledge my amazing colleagues who have done the lion's share of this work. So Elise DeGeorge, Jennifer Daw, Ruth Baranowski, Jeremy Stefik, Nathan Tom, Heidi Tinnison, Bray Menlin, and Jenny Weigel, to name a few. there are others too, so. All right. So hopefully this information isn't new information to any of you, but just a little background on our motivation for focusing on DEI on this project. There have been lots of studies showing the benefits of diversity and inclusivity in R&D in the workforce. But just to highlight a few, one report from Scientific American showed that papers written by diverse groups receive more citations and have higher impact factors than papers written by people from the same ethnic group. Additionally, a study by Boston Consulting Group showed that companies with above average diversity on their management teams reported revenue associated with innovation 19% higher than that of companies with below average diversity. So, based on the research we've seen, we believe that we need a diverse workforce working in an inclusive environment to achieve a full and equitable market deployment. I didn't realize this was clickable, sorry about that. All right, so I want to share a few statistics on the diversity of some renewable energy industries. For hydropower, although women make up 51% of the US population, they only represent 33% of the hydropower workforce. You can see a similar trend for Blacks and Hispanics. Looking across other renewable energy industries, we find that women are most heavily represented in administrative, accounting, and communication occupations, while minorities are mostly represented in construction and technician roles. So there's a lot of work to be done to increase representation of women and minorities in leadership and the higher paying positions in these industries. In solar, 66% of the industry doesn't even track demographics, making it incredibly difficult to understand a strategy for DEI. Although we don't have solid data on the marine energy industry due to its nascency, we think there's a real opportunity to write a different story here and to create a new industry that incorporates all voices. And yeah, taking a look at what a robust marine energy industry would look like, we recognize the incredibly diverse set of skills that will be needed. So not only do we see an opportunity and need to ensure diversity across gender and race, but also an interest in educational background. We're not looking to just inspire the next generation of engineers, but also want to send the message that this industry is going to require a very wide variety of skills and academic disciplines in order for it to be successful. So NREL's Water STEM project is broken into 4 components that generally all inform one another. They are workforce assessment, partners and content development, the marine energy collegiate competition, and job and economic analysis. Since we launched this effort in 2019, we've attempted to weave DEI throughout each component, building a more diverse workforce and providing educational opportunities to those who may not typically receive exposure to such opportunities have really been a project goal since its inception. I do want to note that I will touch upon each of these components today, except for the job and economic analysis portion. We have not done much in this area yet for marine energy due to the lack of data in the industry right now, but this work is forthcoming. And although this presentation is by no means comprehensive, also it's not comprehensive of all the work we're doing in this project. It's really just meant to highlight the notable efforts in the DEI space. So here's a look at our project partners. We're sponsored by the Department of Energy's Water Power Technologies Office, and we have developed really great partnerships with the Hydropower Foundation, National Ocean Sciences Bowl, National Energy Education Development, or NEED, Ocean First Institute, Mystic Aquarium, IKM Testing, Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and Kidwind. Each of these groups also has an extensive partnership network, which all allows us to get a broad range of feedback from different perspectives on the project. And through our work with these partners, we found that we also share similar DEI objectives. All right. So I also want to briefly mention that NREL does a lot of work in the workforce space across many technology areas, and we're leveraging internal collaborations to inform this project as well. In the green boxes here, you can see the core activities within workforce programs. In gray are programs designed to support students and institutions to engage in renewable energy education. In light blue are several new initiatives that are specifically looking to understand or increase diversity in the renewable energy workforce. And finally, in dark blue is the focused activity at NREL to increase our workforce diversity. That's the dark blue. And just also a final note here that we are paying close attention to the Biden administration initiatives, and DEI and workforce is central to 7 out of the 9 key initiatives. Looking at some of the specifics as it relates to our work, there is a goal to expand career pathways for graduates of HBCUs, TCUs, and MSIs in areas that meet national priorities. There's a call to help develop pathways for diverse workers to access training and career opportunities. And as Adrienne mentioned, within the Justice 40 initiative, the administration will require that disadvantaged communities receive 40% of overall benefits of spending in the areas of clean energy and energy efficiency deployment, training, and workforce development. So yeah, we're really excited that these efforts are now getting the attention from as high up as it gets in the US, and we will continue to work on ways we can contribute to these initiatives. All right, so our work so far in the workforce assessment area to date for marine energy has comprised mostly of a curricula assessment and a student survey, which has shown us that marine energy really isn't being taught at many institutions, and students don't typically have an understanding of job perspectives and the perspectives within the industry. So if we're looking to increase interest in marine energy, there's a need to get curricula into the classroom and clearly demonstrate career opportunities. So we'll be using this information as a baseline going forward as we develop our DEI strategy and try to engage with schools not familiar with marine energy, as well as minority serving institutions. We're also currently surveying the hydro and marine energy industries on student job readiness and hiring challenges, and we will incorporate findings from these surveys into our DEI strategy as well. Another key component of this project is partners in content development. A large focus of this work to date has been the creation of a STEM portal, which is housed on Primer and it's available to everyone. This is our initial attempt to provide educational materials and career information to as many people as possible. On the portal, we house our analysis work, marine energy education materials, and various career resources. The portal is updated continuously as we develop both new materials and find existing resources. And our scoping efforts for the portal are informed by an advisory committee and dialogue series where we strive to include as many perspectives as possible. Future efforts will include developing partnerships and a strategy to increase the reach of the portal and its contents and work to determine its effectiveness and its reach across various demographics. So there's a lot of great things on the portal, but I did want to highlight just one thing here. And I do encourage everybody to check out the portal and provide feedback to us. We are always looking for ways to improve. And if there's any resources that we're missing, definitely it would be great to highlight those or include those in the portal as well. So I did want to talk about the day in the life videos that we've made that showcase various careers in the marine energy sector. We're trying to make sure we're incorporating different cultural backgrounds and career possibilities in these videos to show the breadth of skills necessary for the industry and appeal to anyone and everyone. So we'll continue to develop these videos with the hopes that young folks can relate to the people and career types shown and get inspired to learn about marine energy. And yeah, so the next portion of the project is the Marine Energy Collegiate Competition, which has really been a key mechanism to increase our reach to students and faculty and to raise awareness in schools previously not familiar with marine energy. The competition requires teams of undergraduate students and graduate students to develop a concept involving a marine energy device that powers some sort of application in the blue economy. They have to create a business plan, a technical design, and participate in outreach efforts, which really promotes participation across academic disciplines. The inaugural competition was held in 2020. We're now in our 3rd year. We're hoping that maybe this year we can actually have a face-to-face competition, which we think would really enhance the learning experience. And so far, looking at the statistics from schools participating in the competition is actually pretty positive. In the first 3 years, we've had 14 minority serving institutions participate, which actually represents 30% of all participating schools. We've estimated that roughly 480 students and 47 faculty members have been involved in the competition so far. Although we don't know how many went into the competition with prior knowledge of marine energy, through anecdotal comments and feedback, we believe that a large percent of the students were being exposed to marine energy for the first time in the competition. And the application to participate in the MECC requires teams to detail how they will strive to include diverse perspectives in their teams. And it's a message that we reiterate throughout the competition year. During the team's pitches over the last 2 years, it's clear that they have taken that seriously, as the makeup of the teams has been incredibly diverse. And, you know, although we are certainly nowhere near finished figuring out ways to engage more minority serving institutions and bring students from various backgrounds into the current into the competition, the current process has been to utilize NREL's network of universities and to do targeted outreach to minority serving institutions. We also now have a formal connection and partnership with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers and the Interdisciplinary Environmental Association, and we look to increase the amount of partnerships that we have going forward. Still a lot of work to be done, but definitely some good outcomes over the first few years. And yeah, we're really excited with the initial results. We are also just starting to track competition alumni to find out where they are now. We did hear about 5 participants who are working within the marine energy industry. We'll definitely be reaching out to them to learn about how we can help others interested in the field find a career in this space based on their experiences. So a few years back, NREL partnered with Mystic Aquarium in Mystic, Connecticut to develop a renewable ocean energy exhibit at the aquarium. The exhibit consists of a centerpiece animation featuring 7 ocean energy technologies, an interactive mechanical model, and kiosks featuring day in the life career videos, games, and quizzes. If you ever find yourself in Connecticut, please go check it out. The aquarium has an established visitor base of close to 800,000 annual visitors. Notably, 1/3 of the visitors identify as minority, and the aquarium also has some wonderful programs directly serving minority and low-income communities. So through this partnership, we began working with Mystic Aquarium Sea Research Foundation, their STEM mentoring program. The program partners with boys and girls clubs across the country and connects underprivileged students between the ages of 6 through 10 with mentors who are given curriculum modules and activities to teach kids about various STEM topics. Currently, we're working with the STEM mentoring program to develop curricula and activities specific to marine energy under their Energy Engineers program. Once developed, this content will be incorporated into the program and will also be available on the NREL STEM portal for others to use. And you can see on the slide from the data from the program, it really shows the strong diversity amongst the mentees participating in the program. So another opportunity to incorporate DEI best practices and expand our reach within the workforce portfolio is through the creation of regional clean energy talent development hubs. These will be virtual spaces for industry and education to convene and collaborate in partnership with regional industry, education, research, workforce development, and other thought leaders, in hopes to build awareness of renewable water power technologies, showcasing their benefits and awareness on career pathways, with the ultimate goal of building local capacity to join the water power workforce. So we're currently piloting this concept with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation based in Oregon. And I know Sean from the Bonneville Environmental Organization is on the call right now. Hey, Sean. And we're developing a framework of core activities, regional level activities, which the participants will work towards national level objectives. So one of the key objectives here is for the hub to foster partnerships and collaborations regionally that encourage inclusive and equitable workforce development efforts and opportunities. For now, we'll continue our pilot with Bonneville Environmental Foundation and hopefully expand to other regions in the next few years. Possible, click, click, click. See, these are all the possible future hub areas that we have imagined. All right, and so as I just mentioned, the Bonneville Environmental Foundation is our partner. They run a really cool clean energy, bright futures, career connected education program, which has historically had several projects in collaboration with tribal nations, focusing on education being attached to energy development. Last year, they began working with a tribal affairs consultant, and through that, they've worked to strengthen existing relationships with Pacific Northwest tribes and began productive collaboration with several tribal nations who they had yet to work with. One example of how they've strengthened existing relationships is through their work with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. They collaborated with the tribe's education department on their Voices to Hear project, which is an NSF-funded summer learning experience. They developed tools for college-age mentors to learn about energy topics and get ideas for usage in the program with their middle school interns. One part of this education program was exposing these mentors to professionals in the Pacific Northwest energy world through panels, with the focus being those in tribal communities and in hydropower-related careers. Additional curriculum for mentors focused on engineering design and energy topics such as building model, hydropower turbine and photovoltaic applications, in which CE mailed material to the mentors and interns to use. So yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing how the Clean Energy Talent Development Hub plays out and how we can utilize these hubs to be advocates for equity and inclusivity like Bonneville is already doing. And yeah, just to kind of sum things up here, the work that NREL and our partners are doing on workforce development and STEM education integrates DEI throughout, and we've been thoughtful in partnering with organizations who also encourage and promote DEI, and we'll continue to distribute our materials through existing and new partnerships. We've been explicit in requiring DEI considerations in the Marine Energy Collegiate competition and have created partnerships with societies and leveraged existing NREL relationships with universities to promote the competition. As we look to expand the Clean Energy Development Hub, we'll continue to make equity and diversity a key component. In 2021, we'll initiate an effort to begin tracking metrics in this project so we can really start to measure effectiveness. And that effort will certainly incorporate DEI objectives. And yeah, we will keep expanding our understanding and our efforts on DEI and acknowledge that this is really just a start and so much more is needed. And that is all.
Thank you, Arielle. I think I saw my friend and colleague, Jim Mannion, as a mentor of the in the Voices slide. So from Warm Springs, maybe a hydropower, their hydropower portfolio. So wonderful. So thank you so much. And again, just a general reminder, type your questions into Q&A or the chat box. We will collate and gather those for our discussion coming up after the next presentation. And so with that, I will turn to Shannon Souza. Shannon, the floor is yours.
Unmuted. How are we looking? Can you see my screen all right?
Looks great.
There's an error in the advertisement for this. As Jana said, some of us, all of us probably wear mini hats. And today for this panel, I'm actually representing Ocean Oregon Coast Energy Alliance Network. I'm their pro bono executive director. We're based out of Southern Oregon, and I like to start with this photograph that a good friend of mine took of our coast, just to really put a personal touch on it. Those of us that live down on the coast find it to be a very precious place. So when we contemplate large-scale energy development, we think cautiously about how that might go. That provides some context for you. Ocean is specifically promoting front-loaded shaping of our clean energy transition. Initially, it was a group of us out on the coast wanting to understand and learn more about floating offshore wind because we recognized that there was an ongoing federal process to start opening up opportunities for developers to lease areas off of our coast. Our goal is to inform and influence clean coastal energy projects, not just offshore wind, and policies when they're in their earliest formative stages, and to maximize and multiply those benefits for our coastal citizens, ecology, and economy. We are based down on the southern coast. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and I'm gonna roll you through a little bit of context. So this is gonna be really a flip from what you've seen from the national labs coming from the community perspective. What you see here are the transmission lines across Oregon, and these dots here, it's a little bit outdated, but certainly not out on the coast, are where our electricity is generated. Oregon's coast communities rely on imported energy to meet all of our really basic energy needs. This is a coastal range here. All of our transmission lines are heavily constrained. Down here at the very end of the line, down in Brookings, it really is the end of the line, receiving power from the Pacific Northwest. And those routes that must be traveled, both through transmission and for liquid fuels, are catastrophe prone. Our coastal communities are hit first and hardest by climate change, and we're also trying to plan for recovering after an anticipated 9.0 Cascadia event. Oregon's South Coast is resource rich and socioeconomically impoverished. We have a long history of boom and bust, generational poverty cycles. There's a wonderful book that was written specifically about Coos Bay, Hard Times in Paradise. We have an underemployed post-timber and pulp and paper population. We were designated high poverty hotspot by the state of Oregon with a poverty rate of 20% or more. And we have in Curry County, the southernmost, the lowest labor force participation rate in Oregon. We also rank highest amongst the highest communities when we come to things like domestic violence and suicide. So we have these opportunities that we realized. The richer the red, the better the resource. We literally have world-class wind resource off of our coast. This is Port Orford, the westernmost point in the continuous United States right here. And here's San Francisco, just to orient you. So we share this resource with Northern California. Northern California is ahead of us in their process, the federal process, and they're currently working on lease development in Northern and Central California. Oregon's offshore wind can become a substantial complementary balancing outrigger of the Western grid. The entire West Coast and Pacific Northwest is really doing some head scratching about how we will avoid what looks like imminent resource inadequacy by properly and responsibly planning for resource adequacy. And increasingly, we're seeing that Oregon's offshore wind can and likely will play a formative role. So with all of this in mind, Ocean has organized our programming into two different elements, and I'm going to run through how DEI plays out in our programming around education and advocacy. I know that Bill Henry is on the line here. Early in Ocean's organization, Bill joined us to help us figure out the energy policy world. And at that time, he was a graduate student at PSU. And he shared these next two graphics with us, which really did have a tremendously influential impact on Ocean and how we operate. This is a traditional project proponent model. We've got large scale developers. They see either an opportunity or a need that needs to be filled. Folks get together behind the closed doors and they draw up some plans. How can we develop a project? That's when the project is really pliable, but there's not a lot of external participation necessarily from those in whose neighborhood the project would be developed. There's some brainstorming and testing that goes around, and some high-level socialization, maybe with the upper echelon of leaders that represent the neighborhoods and stakeholders to be touched. A formal proposal is issued, working oftentimes with our state and federal agencies. And then we get to the point of developing actual construction and operation plans. And that's when the rubber really hits the road in terms of in-depth participation from those stakeholders. Unfortunately, by that time, oftentimes millions of dollars have been spent developing the project. The pliability is relatively low just when the external participation is at its highest. We recognize an opportunity for a different model, not to stand in the way of the traditional model, but to complement it. We know that we need to move faster than we ever thought possible to respond to climate change, both to adapt to it so we can survive and hopefully to mitigate it so the impacts aren't quite as devastating to the generations to follow us. So what we've implemented, and you'll see here, we've changed our tagline to moving at the speed of trust. And that's really important. What we're trying to do and advocating for is to get as many of those that will be deepest touched by ocean energy, offshore wind, and other renewable clean energy project development into the actual shaping of the projects when they're at their conceptual stage, when they're most pliable. Definitely engage in the brainstorming. And as we move forward, we have some much more, maybe we'll call it a path of lesser resistance, hopefully of multiple and maximum benefit. So that by the time we hit that really deeply engaged external participation, those that will be deepest impacted know what's coming and hopefully have been able to shape that project. So we have launched what we are entitling Coexistence by Design. And the first part of that is to engage those that would be most deeply touched by the projects and identify from them what are their priorities, potential conflicts, and opportunities in this early project planning phase. And that's where we are in terms of floating offshore wind off of our coast. We recognize that those that will be most deeply touched oftentimes don't have time to focus on energy policy or pay attention to what is going on in meetings and processes and project planning. So we're really looking for in situ engagement opportunities. How can we get to people that will be touched where they already are? One of those elements is to present to the numerous service groups, nonprofits, housing and energy assistance, county resilience, and public health. There are scheduled meetings. We can get the outreach, get some initial feedback from them, and then also utilize their existing networks. Tabling at community arts events and parades and traditional celebrations. Each and every one of our communities is unique. It has its own characteristics. And each of them traditionally has one or more events during the year that really the local folks identify with. So the idea is to be able to be boots on the ground at these in these areas. Both Zonta and Kiwanis out here on the coast are very active organizations, and they also have youth service elements where they work with high school students that are future leaders or interested in leadership. So we've started a model, we started it at Oktoberfish, specifically focusing on energy resilience, where we worked with Z and K Club members. Those are the high school students. We provided them with the information that we have. We set them up with a booth, and they are there to take interesting questions, provide information, and just talk to folks. So they're not there to advocate for any program or project. They're just there to share information and expand the engagement network. Another model that we've worked on down here, we have some very hot topics. We have recently had wildfire management in our federal forests. Gun control or gun safety is another hot topic. Liquid natural gas terminals have been a hot topic down in Coos Bay, and certainly offshore wind fits into that. So the idea there is to go to areas that those that will be impacted already congregate and feel really comfortable speaking openly with their neighbors and people that they know. These are facilitated conversations. In this picture, you can see we have a tribal judge. He's my moderator. We provide the topic, and we invite all of the participants to state facts, concerns, or opinions. We make sure that we've heard them and repeat what we've heard back to them, and collect at the end of that the participant priorities, questions, concerns, or additional information. On the advocacy front, we're applying that through our organizational structure, our geographic equity in energy planning, advocacy, and again, revisiting the coexistence by design. Through our organizational structure, We have memberships that are available to the global community. However, only those that are coastal members that reside on the coast or have a basis of operations from the coast can nominate, elect, or serve on our board of directors. Also, those coastal members are the only ones who can ultimately approve our advocacy priorities and positions. We have identified specific seats on our board designed to represent the full suite of diversity of stakeholders that will be touched by renewable energy and clean energy project development, and really took the offshore wind model as the one to design that. We're actively continuing our recruitment to fill those board seats. We recognized, if you were in the earlier panel before lunch, that we have this real opportunity for geographic equity. Oregon's existing transmission system can accommodate between 2 and 3 gigawatts of floating wind electricity. What would that look like to strengthen Oregon's coastal grids and to allow for additional renewable energy generation integration from the east? So ultimately open up even more grid security to the communities in central and eastern Oregon and reduce power flows into Oregon, reduce some of that transmission constraint. What we're finding in traditional models that don't reflect resilience values or economic development is that without those considered, Oregon's offshore wind may only be developed in response to the needs of our neighboring states and potentially without early Oregon stakeholder project shaping. So here are some examples for those that were in the earlier session before lunch. We had a wonderful presentation of Oregon's Clean Energy Pathways Report. Ocean served on the technical advisory committee for that. And here were some of our questions that we had, and hopefully these will be considered as they move forward with subsequent analyses in decarbonization. Number 1, and I see Rick Williams is on here, so he'll see some of his language in here. Include community-level resilient energy infrastructure. Loss of load is a term that's used when we are modeling for resource adequacy. And in terms of living at the end of the line, loss of load can also mean loss of life, and it certainly means loss of livelihood. Energy is necessary to provide for our most basic life functions, just sheltering, communication, food, water, and health services, but it also supports our economic functioning. Our communities that are served by nearby resources are less susceptible to transmission interruptions, and they experience greater power stability. This supports their life functions, and it also opens up additional economic sector development. Resource adequacy modeling is based on a 1-day and 10-year loss of load reliability standard. When I first learned that 18 months ago at a Public Utility Commission meeting, I actually laughed out loud. I live in Coos Bay, which is at the end of PacifiCorp's line, and our reliability looks more like 1 day in 10 months, maybe, reliability. So the adequacy planning that's going on right now is applied to these really, really big geographic areas. It's aggregated and averaged, and that's what they're planning for. So here are the questions that Ocean has presented. How would the outcomes change if the 1 in 10-day loss of load reliability was applied at the substation level, the community level? What if Oregon could meet its own critical energy needs during severe weather and seismic and other low frequency, high consequence events? Thank you, Rick. How would incorporating the economic pains and loss of life to ratepayers experienced during loss of load events alter these modeling and planning outcomes? How can we evaluate the impacts of access to clean energy economy? Communities near resource development have access to economic opportunities. If we're successful in our workforce development, they can tap into those jobs. Resource adequacy modeling is based on a traditional least cost analysis. It does not incorporate the economic benefits of resource investments. So our question is, how would recognizing economic opportunity equity, resource development alter these outcomes? Evaluate economic impacts of energy security. Assessment of service in this specific plan. Assessment of the energy services to the economy was based on existing economies. It doesn't reflect the expanded opportunities that would be available to communities if they had ample, secure energy services. How might the outcome be altered by including communities currently underserved by energy services, where this has resulted in a loss of economic opportunity? How might subsequent studies provide tribal and other marginalized communities with an understanding of the scenario implications to tribal energy security and economic opportunity? We are contributing comments to the Northwest Power Plan 2021 draft plan. We're advocating for the inclusion in subsequent planning events for low frequency, high consequence events. We're advocating to update the modeling platforms and increase the staffing resources needed to accommodate rapidly emerging technologies such as offshore wind and renewable hydrogen. And we are directing the inclusion, we would love to see the direct inclusion of offshore wind and renewable hydrogen in those subsequent studies. At the Oregon PUC, Ocean has been advocating for coastal geographic equity and energy security inclusion in the distribution system docket and integrated resource planning. We've been advocating for the collaboration of those two, just as we were talking about the aggregation of reliability metrics up to very large geographic areas. That's how integrated resource planning is done. And traditionally, it's been done in a silo with separate staff, separate modeling, and separate databases that are feeding the modeling. From that, that's occurring at the distribution system level. That's the community level. We've been successful in our advocacy, and in fact, on Friday, PGE will be hosting its workshop to talk to us stakeholders about their plans for potentially starting to integrate or at least collaborate between these two efforts. We'll also be participating in a PUC staff briefing at the end of next month to talk about the implementation of Oregon's House Bill 3375, which is the planning goal for 3 gigawatts by 2030, as well as the community engagement opportunities in offshore wind planning. We've been supporting and contributing to the inclusive, equitable access of renewable energy planning tools. This we see as a tremendous advancement in this area. This is just a draft screenshot from what has not been publicly released. It's not completely accessible, but one of the products of US Department of Defense's funded Oregon Renewable Energy Siting Assessment that is being overseen by Oregon's Department of Energy is a really cool GIS overlay planning tool that specifically is designed in response to an expansive list of stakeholders that supplied ODO with the list of things that we would like to be able to see so we could participate in planning energy projects. Likewise, DLCD, who is the lead state agency with BOEM in their federal permitting or lease establishment areas for floating offshore wind, has been working on another really cool tool, or a wind map. This one is available. If you have any interest, go check it out. What I've done here is just picked some of the mini layers specific to human uses. We've been working to remove barriers to clean energy security. In the 2021 session, Oregon passed House Bill 2021, which is our 100% clean standard. Included in that is a $50 million federal package to fund community renewable energy program. This is brand new. The staff at ODO was really interested in taking this diversity and equity to the next level and recognized that for many of those for whom these community renewable energy projects would be most valuable, they lacked access to any kind of matching funds. So they made sure to include in the program a $0 match for project planning and development, project planning up to $100,000, development funds up to $1 million for publicly and tribally owned projects that are serving low income with an energy resilience element. Ocean will represent the community-based energy organizations on ODO's Rules Advisory Committee, which is going to happen really fast. The program needs to launch January 2022, and we've got 4 years to spend those funds. Finally, we passed Oregon's House Bill 3375. It establishes a goal of the state to plan for the development of up to 3 gigawatts by 2030, and specifically directs that planning to maximize the benefits to the state while minimizing conflicts between floating offshore wind energy, the ocean ecosystem, and ocean users. There's a lengthy preamble that lists a multitude of stakeholder identified priorities for development of a project like that. Those were the fruits of ample discussions from ocean goers in our policy group. So we're taking that as an opportunity to take on step 2 of coexistence by design, which is to develop community-centric planning scenarios for 3 by 2030 in collaboration with Oregon's fishers, shippers, energy off-takers, etc. You can see the list down the line here. Specifically with respect to our fishing communities, we're looking to the Pacific Fishery Management Council's Climate and Communities Core Team recently published scenarios for West Coast fisheries. These were developed to try and plan and prepare for the future with all of the uncertainties that our Pacific Coast fishing communities are facing from climate change. One of those scenarios that Ocean is embracing and moving forward with is this one. As the fishing industry resurged in the 2030s, national policy promoted communal, cooperative approaches. Here's a list of the top 21 factors that they identified that were facing our communities. And at Ocean, as we approach coexistence by design, we're asking specifically for these highlighted, how might offshore wind development actually result in net benefits in these areas, not to deplete our fishing communities, but actually to help strengthen them. So that's a completely different take on equity, diversity, and inclusion in marine energy. Everyone's welcome to track our process. We have monthly webinars, or you can become a member. And that's all I have for today. Happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And thank you to all of our panelists. This has been a lot of really great information, and I feel like I need about 3 weeks to digest it all. We do have a couple questions, and with just a few minutes left, I'm going to turn to the first one that we had in the Q&A, which is from Cassie, and it's for Adrienne, but I think all of us could weigh in. Could you give some examples of mistakes and successes of other technical assistance programs that have informed the design of this program? And Cassie was referring to the equity and storage program, Adrienne.
Yeah, so this is, we still are kind of pending a thorough review of prior TA programs, but I can say some of the things that we are doing differently is that we're going to the communities first. We're doing community outreach to see which problems the communities are facing, and then seeing if our storage solution is a good fit to solve their problem, rather than bringing the solution first and saying, hey, we have a storage solution, let's try and fix your problem with that. So that's one way we're doing things a little bit differently. We are, the equity and workforce assessment, I think, is a piece that's maybe a little bit newer to technical assistance. And with that, we are seeking to learn more about the linkages between storage and equity. And then again, following through with monitoring the outcomes of the program. Those, I think, are really key pieces that sometimes are not always not always completed or followed through on due to time constraints or maybe budget constraints.
Right.
Some things I think that have worked are in past technical assistance programs are leveraging community partnerships and also having a mechanism to collect feedback from program participants so that the program can be responsive to participant needs.
Thank you so much. And I think there's always a lot to digest. And like we talked about at the top of the session, these energy sectors and the crossover with equity, diversity, inclusion, like these are relatively new policies and programs, and everybody's adaptively managing them. So thank you for that. With 1 minute left, I'm going to turn to a question and kind of a comment from Rick that says, what if we reframe resilience events from low frequency, high impact to, quote, high consequence events of increasing frequency and severity? In that definition, we can emphasize the criticality of these scenarios and the role of public leaders in regional collaborative energy governance and energy equity. And I think, as we've talked about today about some of the EDI language is important. And so I'll turn to Arielle to see if you have any sort of thoughts about how we might shape language in this area to help communicate the sense of urgency here.
Oh gosh, I think it depends on the administration for us, and really, we have to alter our language. This, even talking about climate change right now is new. We haven't been able to do that for the last 4 years. I love the idea that, Rick has expressed and showing the urgency and trying to, get people more accountable. But yeah, it's I think language has to evolve a little bit based on, for us who our funders are, at least in the Department of Energy world. But yeah, I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
As a last comment, because we are at 16 minutes after the hour, but we'll stay for 1 more minute. Shannon, do you have any just thoughts on that and just closing remarks?
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, Rick, and I will. I'll make sure to start including that in my verbal and written testimony in the various planning procedures going forward. I love it.
And with that, I really want to thank our panelists. I want to thank Poet. I want to thank the attendees. There's never enough time, but at least we've provided a good, thorough start to the conversation today. And any questions that did not get answered that you have, we will forward to the attendees to get those back hopefully in writing. And then the presentations and this recording will be on the OREC or Poet website in future days or a couple weeks. And so people can go there to chew on these things a little bit more. Thank you so much for attending, and everyone have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jana, and the rest of the panelists so much for that very informative panel. Thank you all very much. And I want to just remind folks that we're going to take a 15-minute break, but at 2:30, we're going to start the final panel of the day, looking at ocean-based climate solutions with Simon Gearloss, who has brought together an excellent panel. So take a quick break and we'll see you again here in about 15 minutes. Thank you very much.